Hello, everyone. So today is our White Light Collective podcast, and I'm not really sure what's going on, but we did have a guest scheduled today, and I think because we're on different time zones, maybe there was an issue with that. But I was thinking to myself, I have been doing this podcast for a little bit now, but I haven't really taken the time to tell my story and tell a little bit about myself. I do sometimes at events and everything, but haven't really, yeah, shared my story. So I'm going to take today to do just that. So I do have some questions that I'm going to answer. And for those of you that are going to be jumping on, let me know that you're here. Feel free to ask questions and we will go ahead and yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go through. I have some questions that I felt like would be beneficial for me to answer for people that want to get to know more about Moonbeam, more about my journey, kind of what I do. And yeah, so I think I'm going to start off just by telling a little bit about my early years. And so I have always known that I have special gifts, I have special talents, that I have a really strong intuition, and that was something that came to me even as a child. And so I knew that I had these gifts as a child. Probably, I've always had these inner knowings, but a lot of messages come to me through my dreams. And I used to have a lot of prophetic dreams. And so I grew up in a very difficult home environment. And through that, I went through a lot of trauma. And so going through that, I find that people that do go through trauma early in life, they often discover their gifts a lot earlier because we go through things where we're trying to cope, trying to keep ourselves safe, trying to um, yeah, just trying to, I guess, disassociate through some of the stuff that's going on in our home lives. And so for me, I always had an inner knowing. I always had this connectedness. And I grew up in more of a religious setting, not necessarily in my home. My family wasn't religious at all, but there was, Bible clubs and stuff like that. I used to actually go to the church on the corner of right by my house. I used to go by myself to church on Sunday because I was always looking for that connection to spirit. And so but in terms of like knowing that I had gifts, a lot of that through my childhood and through dreams. And so I know that some of the ways that the dreams would come through is like I would have dreams and I would actually see things that were coming true. And so when I was younger, I remember one of my memories, I would have these dreams and I would know that they were, prophetic in a sense. And I remember one morning waking up and going out to the kitchen and telling my mom, "Oh, mommy, daddy's in Toronto and he was with a hooker last night." And I remember my mom saying, "Why would you say something like that?" And but I had a dream. I had a dream of him and his two cousins being in Toronto. And at that point in my life, I should not I was young. I did not even know what the word hooker, we call them sex workers now, right? I didn't even know what that meant. But I had the dream and I said it. And through some different things, I won't really share that personal kind of side of what my mom had to go through in order to be able to learn that that was true. But she did eventually learn that it was true. When I was a teenager, I often would have dreams before someone would pass away that I would lose a tooth. And so I remember having this dream. I was actually having a sleepover at my friend Dawn's house, and I woke up and I said, "Oh man, I had this dream." So in the dream, I was in this high school. I went into the bathroom. I looked, and one tooth fell out, and I had another tooth that was hanging by a thread, and I pushed it in. And um, when I woke up, I said, "Oh, I had this dream that I lost a tooth." And my friend, she's Indigenous, her family's Indigenous, and her mom had said to me, "Oh, well, you're going to find out that someone passed away." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I hadn't really understood what that meant when I watched or when I had these dreams. But sure enough, like 15 minutes later, my mom phones and she lets me know that my Auntie Debbie had passed away. Her and my grandma were in a very terrible car accident. And as they were driving down the highway, a transport driver fell asleep. He veered over the edge, and my aunt turned at the last minute, and the driver ended up hitting her side of the car, and she died basically instantly. And my grandma was in the ICU, and she ended up living. And so when I had that dream where I lost my tooth, one fell out, which was my Auntie Debbie, and another one fell out, which was my grandma, but that one was hanging by a thread, and I pushed it back in. And my grandma being in ICU and eventually living, very much correlated to that dream. And I've had dreams like that, over and over again, where anytime that someone passed, I would have a dream. And so I also have lucid dreams, and when you pair prophetic dreams with lucid dreams, sometimes that can be quite difficult because I remember having a dream where I was out in the woods at this red camp, and uh, I lost a tooth, but because I could lucid dream, I was like, "Okay, guys, we have to make our way into town. We have to get this tooth into a glass of milk. We have to, get and find a dentist before I wake up." So I got the tooth into a glass, and we went and we found this train. I hopped a train, and I remember in the dream coming in, and it was as if we were taking the train almost down into a valley, and I could see the dentist office off in the distance, but then I ended up waking up. And my friends and I were actually supposed to be going out to a friend's camp that weekend to celebrate Canada Day weekend. And so my worry was that, okay, something bad's going to happen this weekend. But nothing did. But then I ended up finding out, and she had a red camp just like in the dream, but I ended up finding out a few days later that the person that passed away was my best friend's grandfather who lived across the street from me growing up. He passed away from a heart attack while he was out at his camp. And um, and so that can be the difficult thing when, especially when you're first cultivating your gifts and when you have this gift of prophecy, because it can be really difficult to navigate what the messages mean, especially for me, because a lot of things come to me through dreams. And um, yeah, so it can be difficult sometimes to try to like navigate. And for me, when I have prophetic dreams where I lose a tooth and I know that someone's going to pass away, that can sometimes be really stressful because I'm trying to figure out who it's going to be. Now, I've had other prophetic dreams where they're not necessarily prophetic, but I can tell that I'm like downloading a message from my guides. And one of those is where I had a dream, before I even had Moonbeam as a concept. I had a dream where I was at this crossroads and there was this store at the corner, and I walked in and I realized it was my store. And a friend that I had since, I was, 20 years old, she was there working the cash register. And I talked to her and I came out, and there was this beautiful indigenous woman with really long hair standing there looking at me, and she kind of held my hand, and when I looked up there was these clouds that were kind of going up into the sky, and she was leading me up this these stairs, and some people might take that as like, oh, that's like you going to heaven, but that wasn't how I took it. I felt like I was like following my path to rising up to universal energy. And so it's interesting because when I opened Moonbeam, that particular friend had approached me and asked if she could come work at the store, and um upon reflection, that's what that meant to me. Yeah, so I've known since I was little that I had these gifts, I had this knowing, and that's something that um, I knew. But there have been times when I've shut down my gifts. There were times when I really struggled, especially as a teenager in my late teens, where um, I found it difficult because I have been a person that does, when I was this younger, especially, I would see spirits. And so there was a point when I was a teenager, and it, if you've never had this experience, you won't quite know how actually terrifying it is. But I was sleeping, I woke up, and it was like sleep paralysis where you can't move. And so I was stuck in the bed, and when I looked up, it was almost like when you look above a fire and there's this, kind of waving kind of heat, and it was a face. And this face then eventually came into me. I fell asleep and I had a dream. And it was a very vivid dream. A person was explaining how they were murdered. And so I woke up, I wrote the whole entire dream down. I fell back asleep, and the dream started where it ended. And so this happens often, where I will get dreams. Um, I will wake up, I will fall back asleep, and the dream will continue as if it's like a TV show, just like starting the next episode. But after that, and a couple other experiences, like there was a ghost in my mother's house, and she used to just like to watch over me, especially when I had my oldest daughter. And but through those experiences, I ended up feeling like I didn't really want to connect with spirit. And so I had shut down um, that to keep myself safe, because I found it um, very unsettling, because I didn't know how to work with that. And so I know for myself, going through childhood trauma, I was uh, sexually abused by my father, my stepfather, for over a decade. And through that process, you learn disassociating, you learn outer body experiences. There's some things, although you're probably most likely not able to control it in a way, um, those are, I guess, I don't really want to say gifts, but those are like abilities that I find that when you go through prolonged trauma like that, you're able to cultivate. And so um, those experiences definitely shaped my sense of self and my intuition. Obviously, there's like a negative side of it, because there's like a really bad sense of self, and I wanted to shut down my intuition, but it helped me hone in my intuition, because I always wanted to make sure that I was going into situations where I felt safe. And so there's this piece where you don't feel safe, exactly, survival mode. There's this feeling where you don't feel safe. And so you really need to be able to muster within yourself your intuitive ability to be able to understand, read people, to read situations, to be able to read environments. And I remember as a teenager, being able to go and know when things were going to happen. I remember walking with my friend Dawn and Chrissy, and we were just laughing, joking around, and you know, them saying like, "Oh, let's go this way." And I was like, "No, we can't go that way." And they're like, "Why?" I was like, "'Cause a black cat's gonna cross our path." And they just kind of laughed at me and we walked down the street and then sure enough, a black cat crossed our path. So we continued on this walk and we end up at this apartment. It was this guy that like he was in high school, but he had his own apartment because I don't know why, but he just didn't live at home. And we were there um, in the apartment and um, yeah, we were there in the apartment and all of a sudden I just kind of was like zoned out and they were like, "What's happening to you right now?" And I was like, "We got to get out of here. Like the cops are coming." The guy that was in that apartment, he was a drug dealer. He was like a senior in high school. And I think I was only in like grade 9 or grade 10 or something at the time. So, um, because I had just said the thing about the black cat crossing our path, they kind of jumped on that. They're like, "Okay, well, let's get the heck out of here." And so we left and we started walking down. This was like by White Pines in the East End. We started walking down Boundary to kind of go back to my house. And sure enough, as we're walking, we all of a sudden see all of these police cars pull up. And that guy eventually got busted by the police that night. And had we not left when we did, we would have been there when that all went down. And so there's this inner knowing, this intuitive ability that you kind of build when you go through different types of trauma. And that's not to say that people that don't have trauma don't have abilities. They definitely do. I know a lot of people that haven't necessarily gone through things, but they have abilities too. But I definitely think that when you do go through um, trauma that causes you to disassociate, to get out of your body, or the need to feel safe, then that can definitely help with that. Now, Um, when when you so there was different experiences like that that definitely stood out to me, and those experiences were what kind of kept that fire alive, even when I had kind of closed myself off for a bit. And I know that I don't know why my thing keeps making noises, but I'm just going to continue on and hopefully it's okay. Um, so I know that there were those experiences that kind of kept me going, and then there was also experiences that made me want to kind of shut it down. Like I personally do not like to see spirits. That's not something that I'm into. But now that I'm older and more experienced, I know that I can help help them move on. um, and but at the time I didn't understand that. I thought it was just like ghosts, and I didn't really understand how to help them. So when I got to like leading up to kind of being 19, 20, I really got back into wanting to cultivate my intuition again. And so I used to read all the books, use my pendulums. I had my tarot cards, and I used to do this thing where I would shuffle a deck of cards and I would just practice trying to guess what card it was before it was flipped over. And I used to do that. I used to track it in a book, how many cards was I able to guess correctly before flipping, and just trying to cultivate my intuition that way was like a game that I used to play with myself to see how I could do that. And then when I was probably uh, I was just 20, and that's where I was working at a place called the Nicolette, and that's where I met my mentor John, who does the spirit talks, and he's been a local shaman for quite some time. And it was interesting when we first met. We walked in, as soon as we saw each other, it was just like, whoa, like you could feel like kindred spirits. And had the opportunity to, it's been nice that I've had that experience a few times in life where you just meet someone and you have this knowing like, oh, I felt that, like we are kindred spirits. We have known each other before. But it was really nice meeting John because he helped, not only did he go through and survive his own trauma, but he was able to help me work through a lot of trauma that I had gone through. But he also helped to mentor me to be able to believe in my gifts, to be able to make sense of some of the messages that I received. And I think having a mentor or even a community is so important when you're on that path, because it definitely helps to have someone. And I have people come in the shop all the time and they're like, I'm probably going to sound crazy saying this, and to some people you definitely would. But what's nice about being able to um what's nice to be able to have, either a mentor or a community, is that it gives you a safe space to be able to explore, to be able to talk about things. And whether you have gifts or whether you're just trying to cultivate a more meaningful mindfulness practice, community is definitely, I think, really important. And so, probably one of the most important things that I've learned from John is that he um, he has been very gentle, but also very truth telling when it comes to my gifts. And the people that I've chosen to have around me in life are the people that will always call me on my shit. That's a must when it comes to being kind of close and people that are in my inner circle. And John does that so beautifully. But the one of the most important things that I learned from him is to be able to listen to the messages that I receive, allowing myself to quiet down and really to trust in those gifts. When you second guess it, I know that probably many people have gone through this where you get a gut instinct and then you don't follow it, and then you kick yourself in the ass afterwards because you're like, man, I should have just listened to my gut because I knew. And it's all those, I think, little micro moments over time that really help to tell you that yes, what you receive is true, what you know is true, and don't ever doubt it, because it's there. Now, I know that um, I have gone through other times when I've lost touch with my intuition. I feel like when I, became a mother the second time, the relationship that I was in was very toxic. It wasn't healthy, on both parts, not just like on my partner's side, but like on both sides, right? They had a lot of like anger management and lying issues. I had a lot of trauma that I was working throughout that 11 years that we were together. I charged my stepfather. I, started going to see a psychologist, doing EMDR. There was a lot of things. And so there was a lot of growth that happened through that relationship. But it was definitely a time because it was so depressing being in that environment that I really shut off. My root chakra was like probably completely closed at that point. I was not able to ground myself and to be able to connect in a way that was fruitful for me. So when um, near the end or the breakdown of that relationship, we had already decided, like a year prior to the complete dissolution of our relationship, that we were going to split up and kind of be separated or poly or, a mishmash of really unhealthy things. But through that process, I knew in my heart and I knew in my gut that the things that they were telling me were not true. And the hardest part, probably, of that whole situation was that this was someone that I had opened up to and I had allowed myself to trust more than anyone I had ever trusted in my whole entire life, because they had been there, they had been steady, they had been constant, even though that's the thing with the relationships, right? Is that they can be unhealthy for you, they can be toxic, but people aren't all bad. Just like I'm not all bad and you're not all bad. My partner was not all bad. And so there was good days, there was bad days, there was good characteristics, there was characteristics that were not healthy for me. And so those healthy characteristics really had me to what um, hold on to it. But towards the end, I knew in my gut that there were some lies being told. And I shut down my intuition because I wanted to believe that what they were telling me was true. And there was even a point where they had told me that what I thought was not true, and that it was probably my childhood trauma coming through and my trust issues coming through. And so that can be, I ended up finding out everything that I thought was going on, and it allowed me to reclaim that intuition. But I see this a lot too um, in like aura readings when people have had their trust broken, that they, one, can lose faith in their intuition because they feel like they should have known, or two, they lose trust or faith in their intuition because they felt it, but they didn't actually take action on it, and they feel guilt over that. And what I want to say to that is, all of everything always happens the way that it's supposed to, the way that it's meant to. And if you've ever felt like you have lost power, then definitely it's okay. Um, but but you can reclaim it. And I am a good example of that. I was able to reclaim that intuition and more. And so when you do feel disconnected to that part of yourself, just be gentle with yourself, but try to do something every day that makes you feel more connected. For me, meditation was a lifesaver. Um, Not only because it helped regulate my nervous system, but also because when I started to really cultivate a really strong meditation practice, it connected me to spirit. It connected me to universal energy, and it connected me to my guides more. And so when you have that connection and you start to see things, those synchronicities, it makes you feel your intuition more. And when you feel that intuition more, right, then it allows you, and you feel stronger, then it opens up your throat chakra and you're able to speak your truth. When you're able to speak your truth, then that helps you with your sacral and your root chakra. It makes you feel more grounded. It makes you feel that you understand what's going on. And that's a beautiful thing. And it also gives you confidence and willpower. And so that meditation practice, it really does help to align all of the energy centers and make it helped me to become a stronger version of myself. And so Since I've started this journey of like coming back to myself, I have started to again reignite those gifts that I had as a child. And it's only been getting stronger and stronger. And so when I do the sound baths at the shop, I don't do it when I do the guided meditations with the sound baths. I do it primarily when I'm just doing the sound baths. I allow myself, and connect to spirit and say, well, if there's any messages that need to come through, then give me those messages and I will give them to the people that need them. And a great example was the last sound bath that I did. One lady, I said, I see you by water and you're standing by a lake and you're content and you're happy. And she says to me, she's like, I literally just sold my house in town. I'm moving to a place on a lake. I bought a place on a lake. And I was like, okay, well, that's awesome. I see you there. I see you happy. The next lady, I had said, I see you. I said, "Are you changing jobs?" She was like, "No." I said, "Okay, well, I see like there's going to be something that's going to change in your job and it's going to be really fruitful. It's going to be really impactful for you." And I was like, "Are you in healthcare? Because I see you in scrubs." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm actually a PSW." And so it's neat to have those moments of like knowingness, right? And I find that when you get those practices, the meditation and just like being connected, being dedicated to being connected, that can happen. The next lady in the sound bath, I looked at her and I said, were you really into biking or do you love to ride your bike? I said, because I see you on a bike. And she said, well, I do love to ride my bike. She's like, it used to be one of my favorite activities, but I haven't ridden a bike in almost 2 years. And I had said, well, I see you with the bike, and maybe that's something that you need to reignite. And then so the next lady, I said, I see you barefoot dancing, kind of hippie child with your hands to the sky, and I see this connection between the palms of your hands and spirit. I see you connected with spirit. And she had told me that she had brought this feather with her. And she said, a dear friend of mine had passed away, and we used to do sound baths together. So I came here today with my daughter, but I brought her feather to be here, to be in spirit. And I thought it was just so beautiful because I could see her connected through the palms of her hands, reaching out and feeling that connection to spirit. And then her daughter, actually, I saw her traveling and I said, you're going to go on a trip soon. And this is going to be one of those really impactful trips, one of those trips where it just opens up your heart space. It's like one of those trips that just kind of um, connect, you with it's going to be impactful. It's going to be part of your life where this trip is like impactful and a big deal. And then she said, yes, I'm actually going on a trip and it is supposed to be a really impactful trip. And so, yeah, so it's nice to see over time intuition growing, and yeah, just feeling those gifts. And every time you use your gift, and every time it just re-solidifies your power. And I think that, yeah, reclaiming our power, I think is a beautiful thing, and all people should strive for it. Men, women, children. There's always something throughout our lives that make us feel that we've lost our power at some point, and we should be able to reclaim that. And so, in addition, I do still use my pendulum quite a bit. I like to do a lot of crystal grids. I think that they're a beautiful physical representation of what I'm trying to manifest. Um, right now, what I'm trying to learn or trying to hone in on is my ability to channel, because I really love being able to just download and receive messages. And so I'm trying to do that in a way that I'm able to do that kind of as needed, that it comes easily. So that's what I've been working on lately. And I'm starting to be able to use that in my services at the shop, in terms of when I'm doing aura readings or yeah, just doing one-on-one. And so I have always been cultivating my gifts, but I never really felt at any point that it was throughout my life, I didn't really feel like I wanted to do that as a practitioner. And it wasn't until I started Moonbeam that I felt like it was time that I should start to share my gifts, because I have the beautiful opportunity to meet so many people. And I realized that my gifts help people, even when I'm doing meditation classes and I'm channeling energy and healing through me as I do this work. And people wake up and they feel amazing, and people wake up and they feel so relaxed. And yeah, it's a really beautiful thing, and that's what started me to want to be on this path. And so for me, kind of, my philosophy or my approach to healing and spiritual connection now is really about being able to bring light to a world that often gets overshadowed with darkness. And when I say darkness, I don't necessarily mean evil. I just mean darkness in the sense that us as humans, we're always going through the human experience. And we if I can help someone bring bring lightness to a place where it's felt dark, then I feel like that's something that I definitely want to be able to share with others. And I'm kind of feeling that this is something that I feel like sometimes life is full circle, where you start on something, you can go on a bunch of different paths, and then you can kind of end up right where back where you were meant to be, or where you knew you were meant to be when you first started. And that's what being a spiritual practitioner definitely has been for me, is having these gifts as a child, using them as a teenager, feeling a little disconnected from them, in my late teens, early 20s, and then kind of returning back to exactly where I was meant to be. And I do feel like I'm following my life's kind of purpose and life's path now. And so I originally started wanting to kind of hold space for people that had also gone through trauma. But I've learned that what I've gone through and what other people go through, there's not really, we call it trauma, but everyone goes through situations that they can use help and support through. And so I don't necessarily kind of pigeonhole my type of trauma to be the type of trauma that I need to help people with. I think that that all humans can use support, and I think that is like my philosophy, that I want to be able to hold space for people when they need um, space, when they need that moment, and when they need a kind ear, and when maybe they don't feel strong enough energetically to heal themselves, for me to be able to help and support them, either to help them to reclaim that power, or to be able to use my um, power to assist them in healing until they get back on their feet. And so, um, I think if I could kind of tell my younger self, because I've done a lot of things. I had a marketing agency, worked corporate jobs, and in reflection, if I had to talk to the younger version of myself, I the only thing I would probably change compared to, I wouldn't really change anything, but I definitely wish that I could have gotten over the fear of what other people thought, sooner, because I hid this part of myself. This part of myself was always here, but I felt like as a business professional or as a mother or all of these things that I couldn't be authentically myself. And so over the last 2 years, I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of, in terms of what I've been able to achieve is the ability to be authentically myself and to be able to speak my truth just as I am right now and not worry about if people think it's weird or if people find it off-putting or if they have different beliefs. And yeah, so I think that's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of when I reflect on this journey. Um, and so right now, where I'm currently being called to in terms of my spirit work is helping people reclaim their power. I feel like there's a lot of people that have diminished energy, diminished life force, and gifts that they can share with the world or even just use themselves. But that's what I've been feel called toward when it comes to spirit work. And so, yeah, so I just kind of talked and talked and talked. But if I wanted to give a message to people that are just starting on their journey or just starting to reconnect with their own gifts or maybe even discovering their gifts, I would say to, one, really get into a solid meditation practice. I think meditation is so, so important. And two, keep a journal of when you have synchronicities, when you have moments where you're like, "Oh, I knew it." When you have those moments, write it down because I think we get so busy in a day that we don't remember sometimes all of the moments that we have that are so magical. And that would be my suggestion. But definitely meditation and journaling when you have those wins. And then lastly, I would say that connecting with a community like the one that we have at Moonbeam is such a beautiful thing. I've met so many amazing people, and it's really awesome to see not just people like that come to my events, but like even like some of the ladies that come to Spirit Talks on Saturdays with John. They started just coming to this open discussion, and just this past Sunday, now they're actually some of them are starting on this shamanic journey, and they've just started like a 12-week program. It's bi-weekly where now they're cultivating these gifts. And so that's really amazing to see, especially where some of them um, started at a point where they felt really broken. I'm not saying that they were broken, but that's how they felt. And to be able to watch and to be able to witness someone going from feeling like they're broken to going through that healing process to reclaiming their power and then honing in their gifts to either continue to help themselves or to be able to help others, that to me is the most beautiful and rewarding thing about having the space that I have. And that's what that's what drives me now, is to be able to help as many people as possible understand the power that they hold. Because, and I say this all the time in the shop, yes, sell crystals in the shop, and yes, we have these tools, but that's what they are. They're tools. Where the real power comes from is like within you. We all have the power to do beautiful, amazing things. And yeah, so thank you for those of you that have joined while I do this little bit of off the cuff kind of talking. I really hope that through sharing some of my story, that it helps you even a little bit on your journey. And if you are looking to, connect, come see me at the shop, shoot me an email, send me a message on socials, and I'd love to be able to connect.